All right, welcome. This is quite the party, my friends. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. All right, it's a party. Look at this. Look at this. Back in the day, you had to go. You probably had to travel hours to study Talmud. You had to take a carriage and a horse. And now, are you kidding me? You just log into Zoom, bada bing, bada boom, and that's it. By the way, before we continue, I need to mention, you may have seen this, and not only not only is it possible that you might have seen this, I know for a fact that many of you have already participated in this campaign. We have our annual end of year matching campaign, which is down to the wire. It ends at 10 p.m. tonight. Intown Jewish Academy is raising $50,000 to help keep on educating and inspiring the classes and the events and the programs. And we can definitely use a little bit more support to help get our matches and get to our goal. We are at last check about 7.5 divided by 4. I don't know who's good at math there. What's 7.5 divided by 4?
1750 maybe.
1.88.
All right, so we're about 1,800 something short of our goal. We have a little under 2 hours. I don't mean to, I know we're here for Talmud, but I will just drop into the chat. I will happen to drop into the chat the link for the matching campaign in case anybody feels inspired to help us get to our goal and secure our matchers. Intown Jewish Academy.org/light. This will help us light up the night. We have been nonstop, well, for 14 years, but nonstop since COVID, on Zoom, as much as we can in other ways and creative ways. So if you can help us, and I know some of you already have, if you've helped us, thank you. If not yet, then I appreciate the consideration to help us with this campaign. And that, I don't know why it's not hyperlinking. Who has why doesn't it hyperlink? But what is this, the 1990s? Anyway, but I'm sure copy and paste will work, and I appreciate it. Anyway, that is the beginning. I feel like NPR, right? But not intentionally, happens to be, I'm watching the clock and trying to make this happen. All right, folks, I'm here just as the introducer. Rabbi Jacobson is here to teach you and to guide you through your Talmudic passage. I hope you all received the email by raise of hand. Did you guys get the email that I sent out today? Yes? Yes? Okay, the email had the PDF. Rabbi Jacobson, I downloaded the PowerPoint into a PDF and sent it. So it has the PDF as well as the link to the Talmud. Now, somebody mentioned to me that, where's the English on it? If you click on the Aramaic or the Hebrew, whatever, depending on Mishnah Talmud, if you click on the Hebrew text, on the bottom of the page, you'll see
reads English.
You'll see the line. Yes, you'll see there on the line. And the coolest thing about this website, all this is the intro, by the way. The coolest thing about that website is that it will tell you, is it a case? Is it a question? Is it an answer? So you know what's going on, like what is actually happening in the Talmud. All right, without further ado, I will hand over the mic to Rabbi Jacobson for Decoding Talmud, session number 2. Rabbi, take it away. You are co-host, so you can share everything. All right, enjoy.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rabbi Solish. After introduction like that, I don't know if I have much left to say. But all right. So we're going to start with another little bit of an introduction, similar to last time, but I'll keep it much shorter this time. I'm just going to go back a drop in the slideshow that I showed last week. I changed it up a bit just to give us a little bit of a clearer. Also, before I get to that, I don't have everyone's names yet. So if you're sharing a question or sharing a comment, please introduce yourself. Like this, I can get to know who I'm talking to. All right. So I just, in the third, I think it's the third or so. Yeah. The third slide, I just had a picture of a page of Talmud, but I figured if I color coded a bit, it might just make it a little more visual and a little more understandable. Although I am not pro coloring in an actual page of Talmud, but I made copies, and I was taught where I got my rabbinic studies in Australia that when you're using it to teach or to learn better, you could you're allowed to make you're allowed to color code some things. So we went through this last week, but I feel like it's worth going through again, especially that I did 2 pages that would have been side by side. So if you were to open up a page of Talmud, it will look similar like this. Obviously, the pages would be a little more aligned, and there'd be more white space. I was just trying to get this over to the slide in the best way possible. So if you look at this page, this is actually the parak that we're learning, and hopefully over the next few weeks we'll get to, over the next few classes we will get to page Lamed Daled and Aleph as well. So just to go through this again, but just a little more color coded, and if anyone wants, Rabbi Ari has this slideshow, so he could share this with you as well. So we're obviously, the middle of the page is the Talmud. Just to make it so, over here it's always on the outer side of the page. On your most pages of your Talmud, on the outer page, you'll have the which daf it is, the page number. So Lamed Gimel, I color coded that in orange, and then both sides, it's like on the outer side of the page. And then you have where I color coded in blue, you have the Amud, which is the side number. So right over here, you have Lamed Gimel Amud Beis, and this is actually the section of Talmud which we're going to be learning, which will also turn over. Well, not turn over, will be the other side of the page will be Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. So that's the Daf and the Amud. The pink here, I color coded the name of the chapter. So we are learning chapter Hamafkid, but on the page that we started, the Mishnah, if you recall, is in the middle of the page. So the top of the page will go with the name of what's on top. On the middle, you have the number of the chapter, Perek Sheni, the second chapter, which is really Elu Metzios. We're studying Hamafkid, which is the third chapter, and on the left of the header, you have the name of the Masechta. So I just wanted to show you that. Over here, I just added in similarly Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi is always on the inside of the page. I color coded it red, and then on the outer of the page, you have where this right here. Oh no, that was sorry. That was on the outside, towards the outside of the page. On the outer side of the daf, you have Tosfos. Over here, there's other commentaries. Hopefully over the other classes, we will go discuss at least a few of them. But this is the primary, a regular page in Talmud will have Rashi, Tosfos, and this is what it would look like. These other commentaries or side notes are worth discussing, but they're not on every page of Talmud. So perhaps we'll bring it up in another class. But again, it's not on every page of the Talmud. So this is what I just thought that would help. And over here, if you see at the end, that would be Hadran Alecha Elu Metzios. We are done the chapter of Elu Metziot. And then, so that's just that. I wanted to go through that quickly again. So again, you have the daf, the Amud. The daf is the page, the Amud is the side. You have the name of the chapter on the right of the header, the number of the chapter middle, and on the left, you have the name of the Masechta, which I will discuss shortly. Because if you look at the name sounds like we're speaking about a Yiddish ababa, almost abava. We'll get to that. So just quickly, and again, not as a study for itself, but just again, it just helps with the Talmud, and it brings out the point that I want to bring about the name of the Masechta that we're learning, of the tractate that we're learning. So in general, the Mishnah, I'm just going to give a little intro about the Mishnah, but again, the idea of it is just to help us lead into the name of our tractate that we're learning, which will just give us a little more clarity in the broader picture. So we have the Mishnah is the 6 books of the Mishnah, the Shisha Sidra Mishnah. I tried writing it in Hebrew here, but that didn't work out. I don't know why. But you have it here on, not the clearest picture, but this is what I was able to find. Not clear at all. But I'm going to try replacing that. So you have the Shisha Sidra Mishnah. Just to go through them quickly, you have Zrayim, which discusses the laws of planting, the different laws regarding stuff that grow. Then you have the second one is Moed, which is times, set times, holidays. That's number 2. Number 3 is Nashim, the laws regarding that involve women. Number 4 would be Nezikin, which would be the order of damagers. So court cases. People damaging other people's properties, the rules about judges, the rules about witnesses, all those would fall into Nezikin, which our tractate is part of. It's part of Siddur Nezikin. Then you have the rules of Kachim, the different rules regarding, that's number 5. The rules of Kachim are involved with the laws of different sacrifices, and then Taharos is purities, which they are involved with different rules of when things become pure or impure. So that is the 6 tractates and the 6 orders, and each one has around 10 or some, I see one of them has 7, 12 or so different tractates, and pretty much knowing the name of the tractate tells you in which order it'll be, and also gives you a very clear picture of the topic being discussed. So I was hoping that this picture would be a little clearer, but for example, if somebody tells you that they're going to be learning a Mishnah and tractate brachot, you could assume that it has something to do with blessings or prayer. If somebody tells you that they're learning something in the laws in the Mishnah of Shabbos, safe to assume it has something to do with Shabbos. However, and this is where we're going to go to, this is where we're going to be going to ours, is the name of our tractate is Bava Metzia, which gives you no window into the topic being discussed. And the reason for that is because originally this tractate was actually called Nezikin, the tractate of damages. However, it was a huge tractate. It was 30 chapters, and they split it up into 3 different into 3 different books. So like a series of books. So you have the 3 gates, Bavas, the 3 Bavas, that means the 3 gates. And you have Bavam Kama is the first gate, made up of 10 chapters, and in the Talmud it has 119 pages of Gemara. Bava Metzia, which is the tractate which we're learning, is the middle gate. So Bava is gate, Metzia is middle, made up of 10 chapters and 119 daf pages in the Talmud. And then you have Bava Basra, the last gate, again made up of 10 chapters and 176 pages of the Talmud. So I can imagine trying to study these books in yeshiva, because these are all tractates that are studied in yeshiva, and to try fitting that into one book or into one locker or into one backpack wouldn't be so much fun. So they thankfully decided to split it up. But again, the name doesn't give us any information of what the topics being discussed are. So I felt that the introduction for today is just to go over that quickly, what the 3 different tractates in this series discuss. And again, just as good information to know when studying the Talmud. So Bava Kama, which is the first gate, has 10 chapters, 119 pages, and primarily deal with the laws of damagers. So you're just to go to stick with the first Mishnah in the first Mishnah and Tractate Bava Kama on the first gate is it starts off with letting you know the 4 different types of damagers that you are responsible for, or the 4 primary damagers. So a human, a person's animal if he doesn't protect it, a person's fire, and one that digs a pit. And again, that tractate really goes into definition of what's unique about each one. Fascinating practical implications. But again, that's perhaps for another series. So again, that's Bava Kama deals primarily with different kinds of actual damages. Bava Metzia, which is the middle gate, which we're studying, deals with financial disputes and matters. Not all of it is dispute based, but it deals with the laws of finding a lost object, or 2 people finding a lost object and debating who had got rights to it first. The tractate that we're dealing with is somebody giving somebody something to deposit, and now there is a possible dispute that might arise because because there's possible beneficial financial gains that are available. It deals with different laws about workers, hiring, paying workers per job, paying workers per hour. It deals with, in general, financial laws, giving money with lending out money, giving out money with ribis. Oh gosh, with interest. All those type of laws are discussed in Bava Metzia, and again, they're intertwined, but primarily an average Mishnah that you would open up deals with these issues. And then you have Bava Basra, the last gate, which has 10 chapters, 176 pages. It's a thick book. Get a pretty good exercise with that one. And it deals with real estate and land matters. So it deals with neighbors, with partners that want to split property. Could you force your neighbor or your business partner to split a property with you? How would that work? And again, that could have very practical, has very practical implications, because it happens that you're invested with somebody, or somebody's doing business with another person, and you want to break away, or because you want to open up your own firm, or because you just don't feel that comfortable doing business with that person. Who has the rights to keep the property? At what price do you split it? How do you split it? Same thing is if you own a property, if you own, and this is I know in Manhattan, this is a very common practice where people buy buildings together with investors, and the investor will buy the bottom floor only because of the retail space that there is. And in some cases, I know a situation where that covered more than a third of the price of the building. So it was a 10th floor building, and the value of the retail space, because it was on Fifth Avenue, and the basement itself was worth half the property, or around half the property. So this man I know that wanted to buy the top 10 floors partnered up with one of the big realtors of Manhattan, and so that tractate deals with situations like that where the building gets damaged, who needs to pay, who would get the air rights, and questions like that. So that is again Bava Basra, which is the last tractate, the third gate, which is the last tractate in this series of 3. But again, we're studying Masechta Bava Metzia. But when we're studying this name, I figured it's important to just know what the source of the name is and where it is. If it's called the middle gate, we should know what comes before that and what after that. And again, that just gives us some input into what, even though it doesn't say clearly the topic being discussed, we have that knowing in which order, in which in which gate it's in which baba it's in, that gives us insight to what topic it's most probably being discussed, at least general topic. Okay, so for the actual reading, doing the Gemara inside, or studying the actual page of the Talmud, we'll do a quick review of the Mishnah, as it's a very important review, is key to learning the Talmud. We'll quickly go through the different things that we brought up last week, the different skills that we discussed, and then we're going to go to our first piece of Talmud, and we'll discuss that before we get to the actual class, before we get to the new piece of the Talmud. So just a quick review. The Reisha. Does anyone want to share with us the case of the Reisha? The Reisha is the beginning. Just a reminder, the Reisha is the first case and ruling of our Mishnah. Anyone? All right. So if anyone wants to pipe in the middle, please. But if one gives an animal to somebody as a deposit and it gets stolen, he's a shomer, he's a watchman, and it gets stolen, but instead of swearing and leaving this person that deposited it sort of hanging until, leaving him in this doubtful place until he finds out till he finds his actual cow or finds the person who stole it, he decides, take your money and take your money instead of me swearing. Anyone want to share with us the rule in that situation where the watchman paid instead of swore? Anyone? All right. So we said, just to see it inside the page. Well, here you'll see the English on the bottom. The mi mishalim, the Reisha finishes off. Who does he pay to? The mi shapikadon etzlo, to the one who has the deposit by him, the watchman. This watchman that agreed to pay out of pocket instead of swearing, he gets the financial rights and benefits that come with that transaction. The Seifa, which is the second case of the Mishnah, deals with the situation. Just to highlight the few key words, is he swears nishpa, he swears v'lo ratza l'shalim, and he doesn't want to pay. So he is going 100% with the Torah law, but he's not going above and beyond. So what would be the rule in that case is, if the person who stole it is found, he pays the double. To who does he pay? So we have here lebal hapikadon, to the owner of the pledge. So that is our Reisha, that is our Seifa. Just a quick review. Now, a general rule about Talmud study, especially in context of the first Mishnah of each chapter. And it ends up being, for some reason, that a lot of chapters in Talmud, the first Mishnah gets the biggest chunk of Talmud. So the first Mishnah gets the biggest focus of the Talmud, and the later Mishnah, even in the same chapter, will get a lot less, and very possibly because the first Mishnah in each chapter is the most general rule, and then the later Mishnah are much more specific situations. So that's just one piece of information. Not always it's like that, but as a general rule, it's pretty safe to say so, as far as I recall. And now that's just a general thing, but in Talmud, many tractates, and this is a lot of pieces of Talmud that come right after the Mishnah usually deal with a wording issue. And sometimes the wording issue may not even have a direct implication to the conversation that will continue. So last week, I mentioned that the big topic of this Mishnah is buying financial rights. And the first question of a Talmud will usually be a question on the wording, and we'll deal with that and then continue on to the topic, or continue on to the next words that it has an issue with, and eventually get back to the main topic. In this tractate, Amafkid, what I like about it is, and why one of the reasons why I picked this is it gives you a glimpse into the wording issues, but then gets right into the main topic. And you could have a tractate that could go on for 2, 3, or 5 or 6 pages dealing just with the wording issues. And not that it's not as valuable. Every word of Talmud is valuable. However, there is sometimes it's more difficult to appreciate such a page of Talmud. At least, well, it is a more difficult. It's many times it's a more difficult page of Talmud to appreciate, because it could go on for 3 or 4 pages, bringing a proof to figure out what one word means. So over here we have the Gimel Mem, which means we're starting the Gemara. And again, we many times start with a question, a issue, a editing job, well, a issue that could be found in the wording of the Mishnah. Before we go to this question, and really, before we go to this the Gemara's question, as a general rule, from the Talmud's questions, you could see that the Talmud accepts that every word of the Mishnah was written mindfully. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, the author of the Mishnah, did not leave any word out if there isn't a reason, and he didn't put not one extra word in if there isn't a reason. And this is going back to the class, to why I wanted to bring up the idea that the design of the Mishnah is to be as precise as possible, because the idea was for them to be able to carry the laws with them around. And you're usually not sharing extra information when you're trying to condense information. So, accepting that, the Talmud starts off with a very, very basic wording question. Lama lemisni behema. Why does the Mishnah have to teach the word behema, a animal? Lama lemisne kelim, and why does the Mishnah have to teach vessels? So here we could go back quickly to the first line of our Mishnah. One who deposits by his friends, behema o kelim, a animal or a vessel. One of the Amoraim, one of the rabbis discussing this Mishnah, wonders why would the author of the Mishnah bring 2 examples? Why can't he just say one who deposits an object by his friend? That would be enough, seemingly would be enough to tell me the story of this Mishnah. If we to break down the Mishnah as a case and a rule, if I give you a situation and I say if one deposits something by his friend. So that's what the Gemara's question is, and it's in line with what the Gemara asks in many Mishnahs. Why is this word there? Why using this word? So it's a question. So let's just do that question one more time. Lama leila misni behema. Why did the author of the Mishnah teach behema? But lama leila misni kelim, and why does he need to teach the vessels? All right, so that's the question, and the answer is one word. But then he explains it. The answer is strichi. I need both. And this is a rule brought in there's in the back of Tractate Brachot, which is the first tractate of Talmud. There is a not so spoken about book which I found very helpful. And I was a little disappointed that I only found it later in life, but it did me pretty well, thank God. There is in the back of most Talmuds, they have different commentary, and the back of Tractate Brachot, which again is the first tractate in the Mishnah as well, there's a book called Mavei Talmud, which means the gateway into the Talmud. And there is different discussion, and again, not my specialty. Is history, and me, it's not something I tried learning it, but it's something that just doesn't stick in my head. So the Mavei Talmud, there is discussion in the history books who wrote it. I am not sure what, there's a general approach to who it is, but there's a story behind it. I'm not sure the details, but there's a book called Mavei Talmud. There's a commentary called Mavei Talmud, and he shares general rules regarding the Mishnah and the Talmud. And he breaks it down into different situations and different wordings, how you know what's where, how to help you know what's coming next. And when it comes to the word tzrichi, he tells you as follows. Every time you see in the Talmud the word tzricha, if it's in a context of an answer, so he's letting you know that I am telling you that each one of these is necessary for a halachic purpose, and that's why he needs to say it. So different answers sometimes will tell you, no, you're right, only one of them is needed. When it comes to the word tzricha, we're telling you that each one of these is necessary and are important to teach me something. So knowing that, every time you see the word tzrichi or tzricha, you know that what's about to happen is that the Talmud is about to break down a thought process, a thought pattern that will tell you what each one of these pieces of each one of these words, or this situation is needed for the halachic, to understand the halacha, to properly understand the definition of the rules of the Mishnah. So now that we know that, why is that? So we know, perfect, the Talmud tells us each one of them is important, and if I would have one and not the other, I would be missing a concrete piece of halachic information that the author of the Mishnah wanted to give over. The itana behema. And before we go inside, what the Talmud's about to do is, he's about to tell you that as much as the Mishnah includes a lot of information in very little words, you also have to make it clear that a lawyer, and I'm just using that as an example, wouldn't be able to use the wording that you said as a way to defend his client or to exempt his client from this situation. Meaning to say, if we were to be very specific or very general about a certain situation, perhaps one could use this as a way to try assuming that the law doesn't apply to him. And as long as he has a concrete reason to say that, no court would be able to obligate him in that punishment. Meaning to say, as long as a person has a solid defense and a proper explanation why the law that you said shouldn't apply to him, now the law doesn't apply to him. So the Mishnah is on one hand very general, but he's also written in a way that people can't find loopholes to get away from the rule. And that's why our Mishnah had to cover two different types of cases, one of them being a vessel and one of them being an animal. Why so? the itana behema. For if the Mishnah would have taught this case and ruled by an animal, hava amina, I would have said, behema hu demakni lekvela, by an animal is when he sells him the rights to double. Why so? What could be unique about an animal that only in such a case would the depositor tell the watchman, you know what? You get the financial rights even though it might be bigger than your output. Says the Talmud, Mishum denafish tircha. Since it's a lot of bother, liayule uliafuke, to bring the animal in and to bring the animal out. Meaning to say, before we go to the literal translation, when I give you an object to watch for me according to halacha, it doesn't just mean that it sits in your garage. It means you take responsibility for it and you take care of it. So if I ask you to watch my cow and you didn't feed my cow, you're that's called negligent. And the Talmud again has pages upon pages. There even the rules about if you borrow a Sefer Torah from somebody. No, sorry, not borrow. If somebody asks you to watch a Sefer Torah, how often do you need to roll it or unroll it so it shouldn't become moldy? It goes through rules with rugs, expensive rugs. And even in the rugs, it goes through details. If it's a really expensive rugs and you hit it with this type of stick, you ruin it. And if you use it, and if you need to clean it out like this. So when a person gives an animal to his friend to watch, it's not a walk. Well, actually, it is a walk in the park. Literally, you have to take you have to do for the animal. Ooh, no good. I just got a message that my internet is unstable. So if there's any parts that you don't hear, please let me know right away. Like this, I could. I'm on full bars, but I did get the message that it's not so strong. So if we're chopping up at a certain point, please let me know right away. Like this, I could wait until it's clear. Okay. So when I give you an animal to watch, it's not an easy task, because you have to feed it, you have to clean it, you have to bathe it, you have to whatever animal, depending on the animal and depending on the animal care that animal is used to giving, that's what you have to get. Now, therefore, it is possible for one to say, if the Mishnah would only say that this rule applies by an animal, one could possibly say that the depositor has very positive feelings towards the watchman. He worked very hard to take care of my cow. It was a hassle. When he agreed to watch my animal for me, it was a real show of friendship. It was a real show of kindness. And therefore, when in a situation where he is ready to pay me, instead of swear to me, I am feeling very good towards him. And therefore, if the situation ends up that double needs to be paid, let the watchman have it. He's a good friend of mine. Okay, so he ended up with a little more money than me. Yeah, it's sort of, I'm paying him for the hassle that he had for those 2 weeks that he did take care of my cow before it was stolen. Right, so let's just do that logic one time. If the Mishnah would only teach an animal, hava amina behema, hava amina, I would have said, meaning it would be possible to say in court, behema hu demakni lekvela, by an animal he sells him the double, mishum denafish tircha liayule uleafuke, because there's a lot of bother liayule to take it in, uleafuke, and to take it out, to take care of the actual animal. However, Meaning, if the Mishnah would only say the case by animal, but it wouldn't say it by vessels, I would tell you that by vessels, avokalim, however, but utensils, the loy nafish tirichayu, that does not require a lot of bother. Let us say, perhaps the depositor does not sell the rights of the double to the watchman. Because what did he do for me already? What did he do? I gave him an object. It sat in his basement. He wanted to pay me because he wanted to pay me. Okay, he gave me free money. I'm not ready to sell him financial rights. I'm not ready to sell him financial rights. So I'm not ready to give him the rights to my financial gains because he watched a cup for me and he put it in the shelf. So that tells us that if the Mishnah would only use the words animal, I would think that this rule about financial benefits will only take place when the depositor has positive feelings towards the watchman, and therefore he's ready to sell him, he's ready to give him the rights to the double or the 4 or the 5 times. That is if I would have the word behema. Now, before we go to the other way, just a reminder that when it comes to an animal, there's a potential benefit of getting 4 or 5 times the value of the animal. And that is, if I asked you to watch my cow/ox, or my sheep, and it was stolen, and after it was stolen, it was cooked or sold, so then the person who stole it needs to pay 4 or 5 times. So that piece of information is very necessary for the next 3 lines of the Talmud. V'itana kelim. If the Mishnah would only teach the case of kelim, hava amina, I would have said, and again, important, at least in this context, means that it would be able to be said, a lawyer, any person that's trying to defend himself would be able to say, kelim hu kamakni lekvela, by vessels, he sells him the double. By vessels, he sells him the double. Why? Mishum delay nafish kifilayu, since their potential is never more than double. If I give you a vessel to watch for me, and it gets stolen, and I pay you instead of swearing, and then a week later we found the guy that stole it, the most I'll be gaining from that is 100% profit. You gave me $100 vessel. The most money, after all the hassle of finding the guy that stole it, get him to pay for it, the most the watchman is ending up with is $100 extra. The guy the depositor, the guy that gave the depositor that gave me the cup to watch says, Rabbi, I'm happy for you. Take your $100. For the stress involved of you're not, it's worth me for the whole scenario. It's worth me giving you that extra $100 as long as I don't have to. I'd rather have the $100 today and know that I have the $100 than need to find the guy that stole it and take him to court and dealing with him and hoping that he actually pays me. No problem. The double, $100 profit's not such a big deal. But that's only by a vessel. Avo behema. bought by an animal, which if the one who stole it slaughters it or sells it, mishalim tashlume dalet vehei, he pays the payment of 4 or 5 times, right? So just to keep it simple for me, a cow, let's say the cow was worth $100, the potential gain that the watchman might have might be a 400 times, right? I think it might be 4 times the value, just because I paid you instead of swearing. Perhaps we could say in such a, I would have thought that the depositor is not ready to sell off the financial rights that exist in such a situation because the financial rights are so great. Therefore, finishes off the Gemara, Sricha, I need both. Because again, if I would say the word animal, I wouldn't know that the rule applies by a vessel which doesn't have any difficult challenge, any work involved in it. And if I would have only said the rule by a vessel, I would have potentially been able to argue in court. The depositor would be able to argue in court and say, Rabbi, you really think, you know me, you know how cheap I am. You think I would be willing to sell that guy the rights of 4 or 5 times the value of my cow? Come on, Rabbi. Yeah, I know that the Talmud tells me, by a vessel, the guy gets the double. I get that. But that's by a vessel. A vessel, I'm selling him the rights to $100. I'm not selling him the rights to $300 or $400. So tzricha, the Talmud finishes off, therefore the Mishnah needs to say each one, because each one covers another potential argument or a potential loophole that somebody would find in this ruling. That is this from Lamalei Lemisni until the Tzricha. That is the thought pattern, the process of this. And again, it's a pretty common thought pattern that comes up in Talmud, of this idea of pointing out, although two things seem so similar, to point out one little detail in each one that makes it a totally different scenario or totally different situation, which could lead one to debate, to argue that it's not a blanket statement, that it's not a blanket rule. And that could come up in different forms. Over here, it comes up in the form of pointing out how each one has a totally unique, well, interesting now. By an animal, it has a unique trait that's an obligation on the watchman. And therefore, perhaps the depositor has more positive feelings towards him. And regarding a vessel, if we would only say a vessel, I would tell you that that rule only applies, in a certain set of rules, Torah rules, but not in rules that are not, but not in a similar financial situation. Does anyone have any questions on that piece of the Talmud? Please share. I think you guys could all unmute yourself. Yeah. Anyone? Any questions before I share one of my thoughts on this piece of Talmud? No. Okay. So I actually want to before we go to the Rashi and then a quick review, I just would like to, once in a while to do a Rashi or two. It's an interesting thought that I have on this piece of Talmud, where the Talmud is giving us a interesting outlook here. Two different ways of debating a situation. And it also gives us, a clear picture into how Talmud works. Talmud is the link between the Torah, the way it's written, and the way we as humans act. Meaning to say, the Talmud takes every aspect into consideration. It takes the human's feelings, a human's thought process, us as people, how we act, how we behave, and at the same time, it takes every law in Torah serious. And you see that in these two different chunks of Talmud. The first one, where the Talmud says, if we would only say the situation of an animal, what are we dealing with? What would be the reason to say that the law only applies by an animal? Is we're taking into consideration the depositor's feelings towards the watchman. We're telling you that perhaps by the situation of an animal, is the depositor willing to sell off the financial rights because he is satisfied with the service you gave him. By a vessel, he doesn't appreciate what you did for him because you didn't do so much. So the whole consideration, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he authored the Mishnah, he took into consideration that years later, a person might say, I personally was not willing to sell the rights because I didn't appreciate what the watchman did for me, when all he did for me was watch a cup in his cupboard, in his shelf. Or I gave him a watch and he put it in his safe. What did he do for me already? There, the Talmud is taking into consideration the human feelings, not the Torah law. There is no reason, there's no Torah reason to distinguish, to differentiate between a vessel and an animal. The only difference is what I feel you did for, what the depositor feels the watchman did for him. And that would be enough of a reason to say that to actually debate that in a Jewish court. And that's why we also have to say the word kalim, vessels. Then go to the second part, where if we would only, we discuss the possibility of only, if the Mishnah would only say the word vessel, then we deal with a Torah law. I would tell you that the differentiation is that by vessels, it's only worth a double. It could only go up in value twice. But according to Jewish law, when it comes to an animal, it could go up 4 or 5 times. So perhaps the rules would be different. We are taking into consideration the Jewish law. And I find this amazing, how this few lines of Gemara gives us so much insight into how the Talmud works. it deals so much with the human, but it deals so much with every word and every law of Torah. It's a thought I had. All right. Again, please, if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, I like being challenged. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, good. It works. I wasn't sure how to say anything, but now I know.
Got it.
I think I understand the rationale for the inclusion of Behema more than I do the rationale for specifying Kalim.
Perfect.
And the rationale for Behema doesn't really, in my mind, get into any subjective analysis of appreciation. It's more like an objective thing that you're going to have to potentially do more work. So if the scenario unfolds that there's a theft and the thief is caught, because you had this extra burden, it automatically entails the double reward. Whereas the Kalim, you stick it on a shelf and that's it. So why should you get the benefit of the thief's double payment?
Right.
In other words, I'm not invoking any subjective feeling by the owner, the depositor, in that way of looking at the
Got it.
rationale for including, I mean, for
Caleb.
yeah, including Behema, listing Behema.
Right.
And I can just try the other half too. You list Kalim. I mean, if all it had said was Kalim, you might think that it won't work for the guardian of a Behema because there's a potential for a big win, and we don't want to give such a windfall.
Right.
If it just said Kalim, we might think that that's all that's meant, because we don't want to have a scenario where somebody could profit so greatly. But they both get the extra payment, so we have to include them both for those different reasons.
Right. Great summary.
Okay, thank you. Just want to be sure I got it.
Oh yeah. So you were making sure you understand. Yes,
Correct.
100%. That was a A1 summary.
Thank you.
That was great. No, that was perfect. So you brought up a certain point, and we're getting closer to 9 o'clock, which one I like opening up the floor to questions. So the reason why I brought up this idea of the feeling of the watch depositor towards the watchman is actually based. I mean, we're gonna get there, and we're gonna get there next class. But that's really what the Gemara accepts, and we're gonna get there. We're going to discuss it next week. Next class is that a lot of this is not based on actual wording of me selling you the rights, financial rights. It's based on an assumption. It's based on the assumption that the depositor would be happy with that situation. Because at no moment was there an actual transfer of a documentation or a wording or a statement. The double is yours. It's, as a court, we're assuming that. We're assuming that you would rather, that you are comfortable with that transfer going from me potentially getting the double to you getting the double. And that's based on the idea that it's a good transaction for me. Or else we wouldn't have the right, court wouldn't be able to have the right to assume that you're ready to transfer me the double if we're not 100% sure that you're happy with that transfer of financial rights. So if we were dealing with a situation where you come to me and you say, dear watchman, the double is yours, then this wouldn't be a discussion, because there was actually a transfer of, but because of this is so much based on what the court assumes, that's why a lot of it is based on what is right for us to assume, how could we as a court sort of be sure that that depositor is ready to give away that money if he never said those words? Right?
I see.
Let's finish off
Thank you.
with a quick review. Is it? Let's finish off with a quick review. Again, it's 9 o'clock. I'll be on for a few more minutes if anyone has any more questions. Let's fine. Let's just do a quick review. We'll actually do the Gemara twice. We'll do the Gemara once just for what we learned today, and then we'll go back and do from the Mishnah just a quick best way of doing review of getting Talmud. And again, we're just going to be focused on the translating and basic. So I'm going to use the Yiddish word just because it's part of the experience. But Zak the Gemara, says the Gemara. Lama lela misni behema. Why does the Mishnah need to teach animal? The lama lela misni kalim. Why does the Mishnah need to teach vessels? We're going back, a wording question. Why use double language? Seemingly one could have used somebody that gave a lost object, somebody that gave an object or a product, the limits, or if these two, why these two? Maybe say a cow and an animal, and I don't know, but why these two? Says the Gemara, tzrichi, we need both. And as we pointed out from the rule book of Talmud, from one of the rule books, that whenever you see the word tzrichi, that means we're going to point out why both of these situations are needed. We're not going to exclude any, rather we're going to say that each one is unique. Now, the Itana behema, for if the Mishnah taught animal, hava mina behema hudema, hava mina, I would have said, behema hudemakni lekvela, by an animal he sells him the rights of double, mishum de nafish tircha, since it's a lot of bother. The yayule ule afuke, to bring the animal in and to bring the animal out, meaning there's a big burden on the watchman to take care of the animal, feed it, clean it. If it has a medical issue, so in such a case, the depositor is ready to sell the financial rights. Aval kalim, however, vessels, the loy nafish tirichayu, that does not require a lot of bother, ema say loy makni lekvela, that the depositor does not sell the watchman the double. So that's why if we would only have animals, if the Mishnah would only use the word animal, I would think that the rule only applies in a situation where there's a big burden for the depositor, for the watchman. If the Mishnah would only teach vessels, havamina, I would have thought kalim hu de kamakni lekvela, by vessels, he sells them the double. Why? What's unique about vessels? The situation of vessels. For it does not, since their potential double payment won't be more than double. You'll never end up by a situation by vessels that the watchman will end up getting paid double. So okay. Aval behema, however, by an animal, the chitava chumachar, when he's cooked it or he sold it, mishalim tashlumi dalad vehe, he would need to pay the value of 4 or 5. So the potential gain is much larger, or the potential windfall. Say perhaps he doesn't sell him the double. The watchman's not ready to sell off the rights of such a big gain. Shricha, I need to have both. All right? Let's just do another power review, just the reading and the translation from the beginning of the Mishnah. One who deposits by his friends, animal or vessels, they were stolen or they were lost. The watchman swore, paid, and he did not want to swear. For behold, they said, unpaid watchmen could swear and leave this whole rule, leave the relationship. Nimtza ganev. So I don't know why, it's a new thing. I cannot say ganev in English anymore. it's a certain, it's an interesting, I don't know what it is. So I'm just going to use the long way. The person that stole it was found. It's a certain, it's like, it started, I'm teaching this tractate this year in school as well, and it just doesn't roll off my tongue properly. So the one that stole it was found, Mishalim Tashlume Kaifel. He pays the payment of double. Tabach Machar, if the one who stole it cooked it or sold it, Mishalim Tashlume Arba V'chamisha pays the payments of 4 or 5. And this is key. Lemi Mishalim, to who does he pay? Lemi Shapikadon Itzle, to who the deposit is by, in other words, the watchman. Nishba V'lo Ratza Lishalim. Similar situation, but different, right? Again, somebody deposits something by his friend, and it was lost or stolen. Now, instead of paying, Nishba V'lo Ratza Lishalim. This is the safe of the Mishnah. Nishba, he swore, V'lo Ratza Lishalim, he didn't want to pay. Nimtza Ganef, the one who stole it was found. Mishalim Tashlume Kaifel, he pays the payment of double. Tavach Machar, if he cooked it or he sold it, Mishalim Tashlume Arba V'chamisha, he pays the payment of 4 or 5. Lemi Mishalim, to whom does he pay? The Balapikadin, to the owner of the deposit, the one who deposited. So that we have a ratio of the Mishnah, we have the seif of the Mishnah. Right, then we have the Gemara, and again, as I just a quick review, that almost many Talmuds, at least the one on the first Mishnah, start off with a wording issue, questioning a wording, challenging why you use that word, an editing issue, an editing job. Says the Gemara, Lama Lali Misni Behema. Why does the Mishnah have to say Behema? Why does the Tana need to teach vessels? Srichi, I need to have both. If the Mishnah would have taught animal, Hava Mina Behemu the Makni, Behava Mina, I would have said Behemu the Makni Lekvela, by an animal is when he sells him the double. Mishum the Nafish Tircha, since it's a lot of bother, Liyayule Uleafuke, to bring it in and to take it out. Aval Kalim, however, vessels, that it does not require a lot of bother. I would say he didn't sell him the right of double. So that's why if I would only say behema, vessels wouldn't be included. V'itana Kalim, if the Mishnah, if the Tana, the author of the Mishnah, would only say vessels. And again, important to point out, if he would only say vessels, although there isn't that word here, but we understand that that's what it means. If we would only teach vessels, Havamina Kalim, I would have said this law applies only by vessels. Who the Kamakin Lekvela, only by vessels does he sell them. Sorry, let me do that over. Havamina Kalim, I would have said by vessels. Who the Kamakin Lekvela is when he sells them the right of double. Mishum delay nafish kvilayu, for it does not, since their potential double payment won't be that much. Mishum, because delay nafish, because it's never more than double. Avol behema, however, animal the chitavach umachar, when it was cooked or it was stolen, when it was cooked or sold, mishalim tashlume dalad vehe, he pays the payment of 4 or 5. Ema loy makni lekvela, we could say, perhaps the depositor does not sell the rights of double. Sricha, I need to have both. I need to have vessels and I need to have animals. Like this, it covers a broader spectrum of laws, and that you can't use the wording as a way to exempt you from the law. All right. Next week, we go back to the discussion about buying potential rights. It's a big section in Talmud. We're going to try focusing on what it says here, but I hopefully will be sending just little pieces of information to Rabbi Ari to Rabbi Solish next week to send that in the email. And again, any information that I send before the class won't be necessary, but might be a little helpful just to give you a broader picture of the next piece of Gemara. Right? Have a happy Hanukkah.
So first of all, Yasher Koach, amazing. Rabbi, are you open for a minute or two of Q&A, or is that cool?
100%. Yes.
Okay, so
Okay,
and I
so
also
I
want to
have
point
a
out this before the Q&A. I just want to say, listen, I'm very grateful that you're all here tonight. Listen, the other option is you can go and take time off from Atlanta and go to a yeshiva somewhere and live in a dormitory and go, and sit on a wooden bench and study Talmud, or from the comfort of your own home, Tuesday nights with Rabbi Jacobson. I hope you appreciate what we have here, Rabbi Jacobson. Yasher koach. All right, that's my little thank you. That's my way of saying thank you, and thank you for teaching, and thank all of you for being here, and I hope you're appreciating it. All right, I am going to, I don't know if I need to help moderate, but Q&A. All right, Dr. Maxey.
So my question is,
Sure.
my question is, what happened if the animal stolen was a heifer and the heifer was pregnant and had yet another heifer? And so it sounds like next week you're going to answer that question, because based on what we studied tonight, it sounds like you get max 5 times for the animal, end of story. But what if a heifer begets a heifer begets a heifer? And so what happens then? And so it sounds like that's what you're talking about next week.
So 2 weeks is going to be, next week, perhaps the end of next week, or 2 weeks will be, 3 weeks will be going through if there's babies involved.
Okay.
Yes, that's. But what the amazing thing is, and me and Rabbi Solish were speaking about this last week, that when you open up the floor to discussion on Talmud, it's amazing to see that so many of the questions that naturally come are the ones that the Talmud deals with, because it's such a thinking, it's a book of thinking, and as I mentioned in the class about the design of it is the dialogue. So when we're having that when we're having it, how many years later we end up with the same questions that they had. It's pretty fascinating. That's why it's important to recognize that Talmud is a dialogue, and sometimes it gets frustrating because what's the conclusion? The answer is that takes a process. So great. When there's babies involved will be next week. Maybe we'll touch on it at the end of next week, but most probably the class after the New Year. Right next week, and then there's a week break, and then the first Tuesday in January. Next week is the idea of just the general idea of buying things that might exist. Right.
Like Bitcoin.
Right. Right.
Well, except for my Bitcoin, because that's real. Yeah, but Rabbi Jacobson, I think what you're saying is we could write this thing based on our dialogue.
Yeah.
Totally. We could totally write the
I mean, we need a little more. I need a little more information and a little more wit.
But we're almost
and a little
there.
more speed. Yeah.
We're almost there.
And I need to be up to this every day also. This is not like, that you can't check out of this when the text message comes in. This is like, you got to be in this.
Makes sense they didn't have smartphones, because this could not have happened any other way. Not with today's distractions. Any other questions before we close out? Questions, comments? All good? Yasher koach. Amazing. All right, folks, thank you for joining. I'm going to let Rabbi Jacobson get the last word, but I just want to say thank you all. Thank you, Rabbi Jacobson. Thank you all for joining. Don't forget, help us get over the finish line. Intown Jewish Academy.org/light. If you haven't yet helped us, please consider doing so. Our matching campaign ends in 46 minutes. So, all right, Rabbi Jacobson, final word.
Final word is only 45 minutes left now. Yeah. Happy Hanukkah. See you next week. God willing.
Take care, everybody.
Forward. All the best.
Happy Hanukkah, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah.